Hello peoples, I finally got around to making this video. It took me a while because I was pretty busy and I also wanted to do it as perfectly as possible, as close to how he plays it. So it took me a while to figure it out properly. And now I think I figured it out, so I'm going to teach you how to play it. I'm going to teach you the chorus, the verse, also the outro and the bridge part where he plays the solo. So if you want to skip ahead, there's timestamps down in the description and also in the video bar, so you can skip ahead if you want to. The intro stops with a D7 chord. That's the last chord he plays, and the first chord from the verse is the G again. So he plays the G just as in the intro, like this. Here he picks the bass note first, the E string, then the D string, and then the two highest strings together, the G and B, like this, and then back to the D. So it sounds like this. Next chord is the F. So you just slide the G down two frets like this. Here he plays the bass note first, then plucks the other three strings, and does a hammer on from the first to the third fret on the B string, like this. And then he removes his finger again and does a strumming pattern with only his index finger, I think. So down and up, and then he mutes it, like this. In total sounds like this. And when he does the strumming, he also hits the strings a little bit harder, so it makes this sound. And this adds to the percussion basically. So it sounds like this. The next chord is the E minor, where you add the G on the high E string with your pinky on the third fret of the high E string. And here you play the bass and the G, B and E string together. Then you play the D string or the G string, it doesn't really matter. He plays it very fast and plays it differently most of the time, so it doesn't really matter which one you play. So like this. And then just one downstroke. And every time he plays these chords, in between them he mutes the strings and does a little bit of this. So when he plays this chord, he mutes them and makes a little sound and then goes to the next chord. It sounds like this. The next chord is a B minor, like this. He does the same strumming pattern as with the E minor. So bass note, highest three strings, then one in between, and then a downstroke, and then some strumming in between. Next chord is a C major, but you again add your pinky on the third fret of the high E string, like this. And here the strumming is a bit different than with the other chords before. Here you play the bass note and the high E string together. You remove your second finger, so your middle finger, from the second fret of the D string, play the D string open, and do a hammer on the second fret. So it sounds like this together. Then you do the strumming again, so down, up, on the highest four strings basically. And then you play again the bass note. So together it sounds like this. A bit slower maybe. Then you do the hammer on again and do the strumming pattern a second time. So in total it sounds like this. So the next chord is a E flat major. It looks like this. This is basically the same shape as a C major, but you don't play it with the index finger and you slide this one up to the 6th fret. It sounds like this. Here you play every string but the two E strings, and it sounds like this. You play it once, then you slide this whole thing up 2 frets. It's an F major, and you also play everything but the two E strings. Sounds like this. Then you go back to the G major again from the beginning. So far it sounds like this. When you are back to the G, you play it once, do a hammer on from the 3rd fret to the 5th fret, and then do the same strumming pattern as before, so down, up. Sorry. So it sounds like this. The same thing with the F. And then you go back to the E minor again, which we did before. It's the same thing. Then back to the B minor, back to the C major, which is the same as before, as the first time we played it. Instead of going to the E flat and the F, we go to the A minor, and here we play the strings just down from the top. So the A string, the D string, the G, B and E, and then back to the A string. So like this. Then we play a C chord and slide it up 2 frets. So it is a D chord basically, and we play the same pattern again. And then we play a couple harmonics, so the 12th fret on the E string and on the G, B and E. And you do it pretty loudly. If you don't know how to play harmonics, it's pretty easy. You just put your finger on the string, but don't press it down. Just put it on the lightly on the end of the 12th fret and just pluck the string. Pretty simple. The next chord is a B minor 7, which we play up here. So the 7th fret of the low E string, and your index finger bars the same fret on the G, B and D string. You play the bass twice, then the other 3 strings, and do a hammer on pull off from the 7th to the 9th fret on the G string. Sounds like this. The next chord is a minor 7, which is basically the same, but 2 frets further down. So from the 7th to the 5th fret, you play the same pattern as before, like this. So from here it sounds like this. Next chord is a C major, which you play on the 8th fret of the low E string. It's the same basically as the G, but you slide it up to the 8th fret. You play all the strings once. Next chord is a D7, which you play like this. You play like a normal bar chord, but instead of playing the 7th fret on the G string, you play the 5th fret. So like this. You play every note but the 2 E strings, so it sounds like this. Next chord is an E minor, which you play like this, up here, on the 7th fret of the A string with an open E string. You pluck the low E string and the highest 2 strings. Then you play the A or E string, up to you what you prefer. Then you do the strumming pattern as before, the same one. So down, up, and then a little bit of muting. Next chord is a B minor 7 again, with the pinky on the 10th fret of the high E string. Where you do basically the same pattern as with the E minor before, so low E string, highest 2 or 3 strings. Then one of the in-between notes, I usually play the A note, A string. Then the strumming again, so like this. So the next chord is a C major, which we just played. You pluck all the strings, you play the bass note one more time, then you do a downstroke, and while downstroking, you do a hammer on from the 8th to the 10th fret on the B string. So it sounds like this. And when you have this one pressed down, you do it the pattern like this. So down, up, down. Then you remove your pinky finger and do a downstroke and an upstroke. So together it sounds like this. Next chord is a D major, where you slide the C major up 2 frets and you add your pinky on the 12th fret of the G string. You can also press down on the bass note here on the 10th fret of the E string, but I don't do it because I don't play it. You can play it, he does it sometimes, but it's not really mandatory. It sounds like this. The pattern is as follows: D, G, B, E, B, G, D. Then, this is the first one, just up and down. Then D again. Then you alternate between the G and the B string. So it sounds like this. Then a again the D string and alternating only one time. So it sounds like this in total. Then he removes his pinky and does a different pattern, which is just down, up, like this. Then he plays the D string again and then the B and G. So G, B, G. In total, I'm gonna play it slowly one more time. He might play it differently from time to time. I saw a couple of Omegle videos where he played it a bit differently, but I think this is the one which he played the most. And after this he goes back to the C and plays it once. Then he plays it again and plays all the notes again, and then one time the D string, which is going to be the pattern for the next few chords. So all together. The next chord is a B minor, which he plays like this, which is just one fret down from the C major we just played. He does the same picking pattern. Then 2 frets down, he goes to the A minor. Then he goes to the D7 again and plays it once. After this he goes into the chorus, which is the G chord once again for the first chord, where he plays the bass and then the other 3 strings. After this chord he plays a little sequence of notes. The first one is the open A string, where he immediately does a hammer-on pull-off onto the second string and then a pull-off to the open A string like this. Then he goes to the 3rd fret of the E string, which is a G, and plays the E string, the low E string open. So it sounds like this. After this he plays a E7 chord, which you play like this. You could also play it like a normal E chord and add your pinky on the 3rd fret of the B string. But I prefer to play it like this, where the pinky is on the 3rd fret, the index finger is on the 1st fret of the G string, and your middle finger is on the 2nd fret of the D string. It sounds like this. From the beginning it sounds like this. And after he plays this chord, he slaps onto the strings to make this noise. Next chord is a B7, which you usually play like this. When you play it open, but you don't need to play the D string, so you don't need to put your finger on there. So it's just this. You place a finger on the 2nd fret of the A string, the G string and the high E string, and you play the A string and the G, B, E string. So it's like this. You play this chord for a short time and you immediately switch to the chord we already know. This one is the E minor, where you add the 3rd fret of the high E string. And for this one, which is for the next chords also, you play the bass note and the highest 3 strings, and then you play one of the middle notes. Usually it's the D string. The next chord is a D major, where you basically play the D major and you plug all the strings together and play the G string. Next chord is a C major, where you play the same strings as before and also play the G string. Next chord is a G major, which you play like this, and you also plug the same strings as before. Bass note, highest 3 and the G. The last chord is a major, which you do by barring the G, the D and the B string. The strumming pattern or the plucking is as follows. You play the A string and together with the G, D and B string, you play the D and the G string. Then you put your middle finger on the 3rd fret of the A string, play this once, and then do a hammer on, or you can also play the note if you want, if you're fast enough with your fingers, play the 4th fret of the A string as well. So it sounds like this. After you play this, you play the D string and the G and B string together. It sounds like this. After this, you can remove your ring finger from the 4th fret of the A string, play the D string and the G and B together, play the 3rd fret of the low E string, you bend it slightly, release it and play the open A string again. So it sounds like this. Then you add your ring finger or your pinky, it doesn't matter, to the 3rd fret of the E string, of the high E string. So it is a A7 chord. You play the 2 high strings and play the G string like this. So together it sounds like this. Again you put your middle finger on the 3rd fret of the A string, do a little bend and release it back to the open A. After you back to the open A string, you play the G string, then the B and E together, and back to the G. The A chord is a little bit difficult. I'm going to play it one more time slowly so you can see how it sounds. Next chord is a D major, which we played before. Here you play the D string and the high E and B string, and then the G string. And then you basically back to the beginning, where you play the intro again, which you lead to basically by playing the open E string, the 2nd fret, and then the 3rd fret. And then you play the intro again. I'm gonna play the chorus one more time so you can see how I play it. So after you play the intro one more time, you play basically the same verse as we did before. The only thing that's different is after the C major chord. So after this one, here you go back to the A minor and play it as before. So you pluck the strings. Then you go back to the E flat we played before. You play the A string and the G and B string. And then the D string. You move it up 2 frets and play the same. So it sounds like this. Then you go back to the G, which you play once. You play it again and go immediately to the F sharp and then to the F. So it's like this. Then you play as before. And so on until you get to the end of the chorus. The chorus was the G, and then we wanted to go back to the G to play the chorus. Now we want to go back to the G again, but not to play the chorus, but to play the bridge, basically, where he plays the solo. So you do this one more time, where you play the E string open, the 2nd fret and the 3rd fret, and then you play this G chord, which is the open G, basically. Then you pluck the G string, the B and E string. You do a hammer on from the open A to the 2nd fret and play the D and G string. That's the pattern basically. In the Spotify version of this song he plays first this chord and then the G7 chord, where he moves from the 3rd fret of the high E string to the 1st fret of the high E string. Like this. Yeah, you can either play those chords after each other or just play this pattern the whole time. As a solo he plays a couple of chords. The first one is a C major, where he plays basically all the strings together but the 2 E strings, and then again the D string, and then does a down up stroke. So the pattern sounds like this. And the next chord is a B minor, which you play simply by playing the 2nd fret of the A string and the 3rd fret of the B string and playing the same pattern. Then he plays the A minor, then he plays the D major, G major. After the G major he plays the F major, which is the same pattern. Then he goes down to the E minor, he plays the same pattern. Then he wants to go back to the C, so he plays the G7 like this to go back to the C. And he plays it for 2 times. So the first time he plays it, like I just told you, the second time when he comes to the G, he plays the G a bit longer and then he plays the F a bit longer. So I'm gonna play it one more time so you can hear how it sounds. to the fun part on how to play the solo. I'm not sure if he plays two guitars at once or just one guitar, but it sounds more like he's playing two guitars, so we overdubbed them. I'm not sure, you can play it also only with one guitar. So the first note is the C on the sort of 5th fret on the G string. And if you want to play this whole thing, and I'm going to teach you a little bit thicker and how it sounds on the recording, you just add the octave down. So in this case it's the 3rd fret of the A string. It sounds like this. It's really difficult to play like this, so I'm not going to do it because it's not fun, but you could play it like this. After this first note you do a hammer on, or you can also slide, but it's easier for me to do a hammer on to the 7th fret, then slide to the 9th fret, and then go back down to the 5th fret, and then slide to the 7th fret again. So it sounds like this. And then you need to go to the 12th fret of the G string, which you can do by sliding, or which you can do by sliding with a different finger. So it sounds like this. Then you go back down to the 5th fret. On the second part he slides from the 4th fret to the 5th fret, then from the 7th to the 9th, and then back down to the 5th, and then he slides to the 7th, and back down. So like this. Back to the 4th fret, and then he slides from the 2nd to the 4th and back down, and then open. So then he plays the first part one more time. And when he gets to this point, after this note, the 4th fret, he plays the 3rd fret of the high E string, plays the 4th fret again, goes down to the 2nd fret, and plays the 1st fret on the high E string. So like this. And then after that he goes back to the part he plays before the chorus, so to the C major, like this. He goes down again, then plays the chorus as before. So after the chorus he goes back to the G, and here he plays the outro, which is similar to the intro for the first part at least. So he goes like this. And here it gets different. Instead of going back up, he goes down and bars the 7th fret of the highest 3 strings, goes back down 2 chords, then he plays a G and adds his pinky on the 3rd fret of the high E string, plays it without the pinky, and then he strums one time the G chord, open G chord. Now we get to the fun part where he plays the harmonics. It's basically the same principle as with the 12th fret harmonics, but you go up from the 3rd fret. So 3 plus 12 is 15, so you play the harmonics, on the 15th fret. Here is the 2nd fret, so you play it on the 14th, and then the 12th fret. He plays it pretty difficultly, so he plays the first harmonic with his thumb, and then he plays it again with his ring finger, which is pretty difficult to do. I can't really do it, not as fast as he does anyways, so I'm gonna play it with my thumb anyway, because it's easier for me, like this. So he goes down to the B string and then up again. Then he plays the 10th fret on the high E string. Now comes the most difficult part, where he plays the 7th fret harmonics with his with his right hand index finger, like this. He bars this, and then with his ring finger on the right hand, he also plucks the strings. It's pretty difficult. It should sound like this. And then he wiggles his guitar around, so it sounds a bit cooler. And then he plays one last time the chord. So I hope you enjoyed this one, and yeah, it was a bit faster than the first one because it's a lot longer. I hope you could learn it still. If you have any questions, ask me down in the comments. I will try to answer everything, and yeah, have fun learning and playing this song. Thank you.